Welcome to the Hillsboro Hops neighborhood meeting. This is for the new ballpark conditional use permit application. This is specifically required part of the land use process. So we're going to get started on doing introductions. I'm at the bottom here. My name is Melissa Slotemaker with AKS Engineering and land use planner. I'm part of the project team. KL Wambacher's here with Hillsboro Hops. City of Hillsboro, Rahim Harji, Sean Morrison, Christy Dawson, and Krista Snell. And Rahim wanted to point out a few other city staff that's available here as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to also introduce Suzanne Lenine, our finance director, who's in the audience, Robbie Hammond, our city manager, Scott Rucker, who oversees the J. Parson complex, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Dave Milicic just walked in, our thanks and verification director.
Mortensen is here. They're the project manager, Trent Rayfeld and Jake Thompson for the new Hop Stadium. And Carissa Berry here from SRG is here. She's the architect on the project. And again, my name is Melissa Slotemaker. So we're gonna start off with Rahim giving some background.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So before we got into some of the details around the project, I thought it would be important to just spend maybe a few minutes talking about how we got here and some of the developments along the way. So some of you may or may not be familiar, the Hops got promoted to the High A division. I just have to caveat this with, I'm not really good at baseball lingo because I just haven't been active in baseball, so I might get one of these terms wrong. But so they got promoted to High A, resulted in more games as well, 66 home games. But with that came some requirements to meet certain player development requirements that the Hops had to meet. The requirements focused primarily on player health and wellness. So there were things that they had to do to kind of stay in that league. The Hops are not unique. There's a number of other teams, I think about 119, who had to do the same thing. Each of them are taking different approaches on meeting those requirements. So as this came to the city, we started having a conversation about maybe doing more than just the minimum. Maybe there's an opportunity here to create a larger entertainment destination. So we started having conversations with the Hops and our council about what that could look like. I have to say this isn't your typical project because we had some deadlines we had to meet. There were requirements that needed to be in place by a certain time. There's financing that needs to be worked on. There's loss of use, which I'll touch on here in a minute. Usually we like to have these things sequenced out, right? We have answers to the next step, but just because of some of the timelines, we didn't have the luxury to do that. So we put together an MOU with the Hops just to kind of memorialize our partnership, to talk about like what does long-term look like here within the city. Then we started off going down the path of looking at what a renovation on Rontonkin Field looks like. We went, explored some options. The price came in at about $160 million. We still had challenges with separating the two facilities because the Hops were going to take over more operations and maintenance of Rontonkin Field. There were some constraints with the site. There was a water line to the west, there's obviously the road to the south, there's a stadium to the north, and then there's Field 3 to the east. So it's a tight spot, and we would still end up sharing portions of that facility. Our initial plan at that time was to provide funding. The city would provide funding in the amount of $10 million in TLT, and then loan the Hops, I believe it was $30 million in TLT as well, but that would be paid back to the city. That was the initial funding approach. And as the price came in, it started to look like it was very expensive, about $160 million. So we looked at some other options, which was building a new stadium where Fields 4, 5, and 6 are. We put together internal pros and cons list, did some initial analysis, showed that the cost could come in at about $120 million. There were less site constraints, it would be a totally separate facility. And we would obviously gain back the use of Rontonkin Field full-time, because we do use it part-time right now. And then we couldn't use Field 3 when the Hops were playing or practicing, so we would get that back full-time. We shifted our funding approach to providing $18 million in TLT. And I'll talk about TLT in just a second. and the project cost came in at about 120 million. So the TLT, the transient lodging tax that we would be using towards this project, has to go towards projects that bring in more heads and beds, technically. So that's bringing more tourists from outside of the area to spend money within the community. So that's kind of where we are right now. We went through a 10% design, we're moving towards a 35 right now. And in concert with that, there's certain things that we have to still work on. So we're still working on a long-term lease agreement. We're negotiating that with the Hops right now. We're still working on finalizing the financing. But I think one of the big concerns, I'll just touch on that right now, is just mitigating the lost fields. So like I said earlier, usually we'd have these answers already before we keep moving down in the project path. But just because of the timeline with this project, we haven't got a final plan for mitigating the lost use. We have some ideas and some options that we're exploring, and we're hoping to get some more finality to present to our Parks and Rec Commission by the end of this month, and then come up with a plan to do that. Again, it'd be nice if we had that now, but we just aren't there because of some tight timelines. Set. Okay, so just something about the mitigating lost fields. So we are looking at on-site options as well. There's two areas on the complex, one at the northwest and the other at the northeast, that we're looking at exploring if 2 softball fields can fit there and what the price is. We're also looking at off-site options. We've done some initial analysis a couple of years back, so we can just reuse that work. And then just a quick thing on the timeline, kind of went over real quick on how we got here. There's a couple of things that I thought I'd mention. So at the end of 2020 was when staff started doing some of the initial concept work after the Hops let us know that they got promoted to this high A league. In early 2021, we signed an exclusive negotiating agreement between us and the Hops, just to make sure that we were on the same page of the path we're going down. We presented some options to our council at the end of 2021, executed a contract with Mortensen, who will you get introduced to here shortly, who's our design build contractor, in around May of 2022. We started progressing towards a 10% design in October of 2022. We then realized that cost came in pretty high. Looked at some options at the end of 2022, went to our city council to discuss the change in the project direction in early of 2023, and we received our 10% design deliverable on what this project would look like in April. I'll talk about where we're going towards the end, because there's still some steps we need to take to, but I'll turn it over back to the project team.
Sounds good. Jake Thomas reports. So Raheem touched really well on where we have been, and so moving forward, we are currently in the conditional use permit process. We plan on submitting the development review application June 15th and going for early grading permit in July. The plan right now is for us to break ground in October with early grading, and then the rest of the building structure starting in November. The idea is that we will be done by the 2025 season to support the Hops. So high level, the complex or the building is on the Gordon Faber complex. We will be taking the 3 fields north, the 3 fields north of the existing Ron Tonkin facility itself. And we are really limiting it to the actual fields itself and not touching the parking structure. This is a screenshot of the existing facility right now, and as you can see, it's the 3 softball fields. The site plan, I'll give it to Carissa, SRG, who's our design partner on this.
Hey everyone. So for the site plan specifically, what you're seeing up on the screen is the bulk of the primary building is facing towards Century Boulevard. So obviously this is a baseball stadium, but one of the main focuses of the project is also to be an entertainment venue. So concerts and different events throughout the year, so it can be used more than just a baseball facility. Out in the outfield, there are a couple outbuildings to support some other spaces, including a seating berm like at the existing stadium. And then like Jake said, leaving the parking completely in place.
So this is the current conceptual image right now. And as you can see, as Carissa explained, it's faced northeast with home plate buildings behind and a few outfield buildings. We'll kick it off to Melissa for the land use application process.
So again, this is for a conditional use permit. So this application, it follows a type 3 procedure that goes to the Planning and Zoning Hearings Board for a decision. So right now in bold, you can see we're having a neighborhood meeting, putting together the application. The application will then be submitted to the city. Notice will be provided to neighboring properties. Staff will put together their staff report, and it will go to hearing at the Planning and Zoning Hearings Board. So people will have the opportunity to provide written comment or public comment through that official hearings process. And I know most of you either got a notice in the mail or you found out about this meeting some other way. So if you got a notice in the mail, you get notice again for the actual application. And if not, the information is provided on the city website too, and they're gonna, I'm sure, update that as the project moves forward. Jake also mentioned that there will be a future development review application that will not go to hearing, but it will go through the land use process. You'll also have an opportunity to provide public comment through that process as well. And there's also property line adjustment that's pretty minor, that's part of the application in the future. And this, I'm going to hand it back off to Ricky.
Yeah, so thank you, Melissa. So a couple of next steps, obviously, Melissa talked about the land use process, but in the project timeline overall, there's a couple of things that we still need to go through. Like I mentioned, the city and the Hops are going through a negotiation right now on the lease. We need to finalize our plans for mitigating the lost use, which we'll be presenting to the Parks and Rec Commission for some options. We still have to receive a 65% set of plans and a guaranteed maximum price to finalize our financing plan. The City Council still has to finalize the lease agreement, approve the lease agreement and the final contract for Mortensen to get to construction. Obviously implement the construction and the loss of use plan. So we still have a couple of steps to go, but this is just a step in the process.
So that concludes our formal presentation. We are open for questions now. So if you have a written question, you can hand that up to us, or if you would like to ask a question out loud, that's great too. Kind of raise your hand so we can call on you, and we're going to document all the questions as well. If you have further questions that staff can answer, outside of this process, you're welcome to follow up with them directly. But we're here to have a public forum about this application, so we welcome any questions.
Hi, I'm Karen Edwards. How will parking be addressed? I mean, if it can seat 8,000 per concert, where are 4,000, 6,000 cars going to go?
Who wants to take that?
I can touch on it maybe briefly. So for concerts, we're more like 7,000, and the current complex is already rated for 7,000. We're probably more in the 6 to 7 range for concerts. We're working on a rideshare program. There's going to be a new tram and bus line, two bus lines actually that are coming right to the site that will come right through Renko Station 2, which will help connect the light rail to the stadium. We've done a light rail shuttle in the past. We did it until 2019. Wasn't used very well, but if we have to bring that back, we'll bring it back. We're also going to work with some neighborhood parking lots to see if we can cut deals with them to park cars off-site.
So do you then provide that for the Ron Tonkin Stadium? Because we can't have both stadiums full at the same time and have capacity. Isn't that correct?
So I can take that.
Okay.
So right now we're in the process of negotiating how the use, like joint use, would occur. So that way we don't run into those situations. So that way we're not having two major events that may take up like all the room on our Tonkin Field and create problems with traffic and all that. So we're working through that.
And how does it balanced? Like, if the city has a major event and you have a major event, which wins? High schools or not high schools?
That's part of the negotiation right now.
Okay.
I can tell you from our perspective and our philosophy, we want to be good community players. We feel like we have been good community players for 10 years now. This week's a great example. We've moved two of our games to day games. I know Dave and I had a lot of discussion about it last year, and this year, we moved our games to day games. We're going to lose about 40 or 50 grand on Friday by moving it to a day game, but we did that to be a good community player for the school district. We plan to do that in the future.
How many events a year? I think I read 400 or so.
What? 214 or something.
No, I'll go crazy. I get tired after 66 baseball games. So, I mean, it's going to vary. It depends what you call an event. Like if we have youth teams using our batting cages for free, if that's considered an event, then that's going to rack up the numbers. If we have high school teams playing a game on our field, and they're playing there for free, then that might be an event. So it kind of depends what you define event. I would say as far as well, concerts probably anywhere from 10 to 20, so not a ton. Hops games 66, that's Major League Baseball. Maybe a couple of D1 college games. So we have a feasibility study that's been done by CSL International, and I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 events. But a lot of that doesn't take into effect, youth, high school games, maybe a little corporate rental that's 50 people, stuff like that, corporate meetings.
So if I understood your presentation correctly, it still has to go through zoning and planning, is that correct?
Yes.
So does that mean that there are some concerns that could kill this project? Or are we talking rubber stamp process?
Well, the conditional use permit process takes the use into consideration. So there needs to be enough information provided in the application to know it's an industrial zoning. So it looks at the zoning, what's permitted in the zone, looks at what's being proposed for the use, and the ball fields are conditional use permits. So that they look at traffic and noise and basically just updating the existing conditional use that's already in place for the Ron Tonkin Field. So that's what the conditional use, I wouldn't call it a rubber stamping, it's just the land use process for that. And then the development review process is for the actual building. So the review of the design of the building and the capacity of the building, things that are still being worked out. And that will also go through the public application process.
Last week, I was going to get some dinner over by Oasis on Embry, and I guess there must have been a gig going on because traffic went all the way down to Evergreen, over to Embry, and up Embry. And things are probably not going to get better when you make the stadium bigger. So does this plan include anything to help with the traffic? Because it shouldn't really have stadium traffic going up Embry.
We were in Everett last week, so I don't know if it was us.
Okay, maybe well, there was something going on. I mean, I don't know. I made an assumption that there was something going on there.
But to your point, yeah, it might be the marathon. But yeah, but to your point, there are going to be times where there are going to be traffic impacts. They are now when people are trying to get in and out of the games, and we have as part of our plan a traffic impact analysis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, or
we did a parking study.
I'm sorry, yeah, I got my terminology mixed up. But yeah, I'm not going to tell you that there won't be challenges with access in and out of the site. But with some of the other options we're exploring, like trying to getting better bus service out there, Kale mentioned TriMet and the partnership with them. They are providing a more dedicated service out there, not just for the stadium, but the North Hillsboro area, which is intended to actually go in place with their Forward Together plan about the time the stadium opens. So hopefully with these additional things, there'll be better traffic circulation, but there will be times where traffic will be a concern.
So there's no specific plans to change, like widen roads or add roads, anything like that?
Yeah.
And I'll just add, so I think the Helvetia Marathon is probably what you're talking about. Last weekend. What's that?
That would affect the traffic in the evening?
No, probably not.
I mean, this was dinner time, I'm sorry, this was like 6 p.m.
Okay.
Could have been an Intel shift.
Come on.
So I think you were next, and right after that gentleman.
So I know from this meeting, the requirement is to invite people that were property owners within 500 feet of the site. Well, you don't have a lot of people, a lot of neighbors. I don't think Fred Meyer really cares probably a whole lot about this. But I guess the question, the people that were really impacted by this, the users of the complex, did the city invite them to the meeting? I mean, I would think if you were really genuinely wanting to hear from the people that are going to be impacted by this, that they should have been invited to this meeting. And I don't know if the city did that or not. But
so apart from notifying the folks within 500 feet, right, and publicizing this on our social media platforms, like city, parks, library, all that, we didn't do anything beyond that. However, as we develop options for mitigating our lost use, our intent is to have that more, that type of conversation that you're talking about, to invite them to see what that plan is. Now, I don't know what that looks like, just to be candid, because we haven't gone through that work yet. I also don't want to overstep and not bring them to the Parks Commission first before.
Parking repercussions from the stadium there, but my questions are already answered about traffic, but any implications or any planned outages for infrastructure, water, power, things of that nature?
At this point, no. We were planning to keep all of the surrounding areas online during the whole entire construction.
Under the renovation design, we would have had to shut down the north transmission line for quite some time. This one, there's no major main lines or anything running through the site that would require that. Maybe some local complex area shutdowns that we have to do. But other than that, there shouldn't be any impacts.
Yeah, it's clearly a benefit for the Hops to have a new stadium, and I wonder if you can put a figure of how much we as a public are going to be putting towards that. And then since this is a Parks and Rec type situation, we're eliminating some of that. It seems kind of curious, we spend so much money supporting a for-profit entity and we're losing something for our own area. We don't have enough sports fields. And so I'd like to know how much will be, and then how much are you planning to spend to replace fields in the future?
Thanks for the question. So I understand that helping a private business to frankly generate more revenue is concerning, right? Especially if it sounds like we're losing some fields and not making up for it. One of the things that our city council was very adamant about was making sure we don't lose we don't lose community use recreation. So that's something in our original agreement, it's in our agreement with the Hops, it's in that MOU that I talked about. So to address the loss of use first quickly, we have to make up the lost use. It isn't if we're going to make up the lost use. It's we have to make up the lost use. And we're working through that right now. Like I said, I wish I had an answer on how we're going to do that. We just haven't got to that yet. We have a couple of options we're exploring, and as those become more clear and we get more refined, we will have a public information session on what that would look like. Secondly, you talked about the $18 million so we are contributing, the city is contributing $18 million in transient lodging tax. So the transient lodging tax, Suzanne, if I get this wrong, please just throw something at me. It's split up into two parts. There's 30% that goes towards our general fund, and then there's 70% that has to go towards a project. It's statutorily required to go towards projects that generate more heads and beds. So it basically creates more hotel nights and things like that. The intent of that is so that it generates more revenue by bringing in more people into our community. So a project like this was a good project for it, where having more concerts, having baseball games, having other events at the site that would bring in more people will generate more TLT. That's the intent of it, so that it does pay back for itself over time. So that's why the city felt that that was where they wanted to contribute the $18 million to it.
Would the Hops provide some money then to replace the sports fields, since we're giving that to them?
So we're negotiating a lease agreement right now that has certain things in there, and it's a negotiation process right now, so I prefer not to say more than that. I recognize that's being ambiguous, but going through a negotiation process right now, I'd like to just leave it at that. Sorry if it's being vague, but...
First off, we're as concerned about having less fields than anyone else in this room. I guarantee you that. We've donated close to $1 million for youth baseball and softball since we've moved the team here, cash. You won't find a minor league team in the country that's donated that level of money in 10 years towards youth baseball and softball, I promise you. So we're highly concerned about it as well. The last thing we want to do is, quote unquote, take fields away from kids. Part of our commitment to the new ballpark is going to be opening it up for usage for youth. We're designing our batting cages away to where you have an outside entrance, and we can open that up for kids to use year-round when the Hops aren't using it for free. We plan to do, Little League opening days, work with tournament directors. Northwest Nations does a lot of tournaments. We haven't really worked with them a lot in the past, but we want to have some outreach with them to see can the new ballpark be used for some tournaments as well, where now you have 2 major stadiums instead of 1. So now you have the best tournament site in the country when it comes to youth baseball and softball. Putting in retractable now, and so we can easily convert it to softball as well and peg the basis for softball. Softball is very important to us as well. So I think the headline is dramatic, but I think the action plan of how the stadiums are going to be used is going to be what's really important. It's going to help solve a lot of these issues. Not to mention the city getting Ron Tonkin Field 365, where we are, because of our schedule, we're dominating the use of that facility, and the city will be able to program that all for community use.
Hi, I just want to ask a question about the construction. During the construction, it seems like, starting in October this year, going all over to 2025. How is that going to impact the leftover of the 2 stadiums, I guess, also the football stadium? Besides the 3 fields that we are losing, there will be impact because, during the construction, there's a lot of things going on, and parking lot as well, where everything's going to be staged. How is that going to impact the football stadium?
Yeah, sure. Actually, we're working right now with Mortensen to come up with the construction site plan, the staging plan. We still need to work with Parks Operations on the complex to figure out how all that's going to work. So part of the site will be shut down, but we're going to do our best to try and reroute traffic in and out of the complex so that it can still function while we're doing construction.
But there will be still lots of parking during that time, correct?
Correct, yeah.
How much, do you know by any chance?
We don't know the exact number at this point. We still need to balance that with the parks staff on site.
Just to set clear expectations, there will be impacts. You know, there will be short-term impacts when we're doing construction. We don't know what that looks like right now because we just haven't had a chance to sit down and go through that, but we intend to.
So why didn't we have a cost factor in the $120 million for the loss of these fields? Because the decision came down to $160 million. This is better, it's 120. But to replace these 3 fields, it could be 30 or 40 million. You're never going to get fields like that again, but if you go dollar per dollar, that would have made the project a push, and then we wouldn't be here tonight. We would just keep pushing the way we're going. And if you guys want a rock concert, there's land on the edge of town. You can work with the fairgrounds, but it just looked, the books looked cooked. It looked disingenuous to do that. And I know that's not what the intent was, but it made the council decision automatic, sure. But we lost 9-10 acres we're going to of land that's probably valued at fully improved $2 million an acre, something like that, being a developer. There's another 16 million that's not in the budget. So, and then just I'll cap that, Raheem, by saying, why are we moving to approve the design when we have no idea where we're going to replace these fields, which everybody, including Kale, says he doesn't want that problem. So why don't we stop, or why don't we run a dual path and not let one move ahead without the other being solved?
So maybe I'll answer that last one first before some of your other comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the challenges with this project is it's a tight timeline, right? So it's not like we haven't been doing any work on looking for places and ways to mitigate the lost trees. We have. Yeah, it is hard, but we're working on that. And we should have something to the Parks Commission by the end of June, and we will have options to present. Now, I can't tell you whether those options will be a couple million, 20 million, I don't know. I will tell you like 40 million is probably not what the lost use is going to cost. We have some preliminary numbers from previous work, so I know it's not at that order of magnitude. But ideally, you're right. I mean, we should have done this sequentially, but we just don't have the luxury with the timeline on this project and the complexities.
But why do we get this far and then hit the wall and say there's no choice, go this way?
There's no time.
So,
I mean, it happened in February or March in one of your meetings where there was a sudden shift, and you've been working on it since 2020, so what changed?
So the shift, we got Mortensen on contract to start the work in 2022, 2021? I have the date, for a second. So yeah, we went into getting more specifics with the design we started the work with Mortensen in May of 2022. So we needed some time to go through a 10% design, which we got, I have the exact date, October 14th. That's when we saw the costs come in pretty high. That's when we started looking at an alternative, and that's why we're here today.
So the replacement field, are you just looking to replace the 3 that are lost? Because as nice as the 2 new fields would be for a tournament, you can't have a tournament on 2 fields. And the fact that there was 6 fields, and including the stadium and hops, there was even more than 6. You could have really some unbelievable tournaments. And I guarantee those tournaments for 3 days bring more hotel beds than a hops game. Because who's staying in a hotel besides the other team for a hops game?
Again, I would have hoped to have had all this information by now, being honest with you, about where we're mitigating the lost use, and to your point, like how we can move things around too. We're just not there yet. And
there's no other room to add more fields at that area. I mean, we all agree.
I mean, I think that's the biggest issue here, is that the complex is really going to lose the opportunity to host these tournaments, which were so popular, and it was probably the best venue in the whole Portland region to have these kind of events. and that's going to be lost now. And that's the fundamental problem I think that the city is creating here. You can replace the field somewhere else, but that's not going to solve the issue at the complex. And frankly, to say that this project is the only project in the city of Hillsboro that this lodging tax money could be used for, that's just not true. Other communities all around the state are using this money for other kinds of projects. They don't have a ball field, a ballpark to be putting money into. So let's not say that this is the only thing that the money could be used for.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't think we've ever said this was the only thing that the money could be used for. At the time we made the decision, this was the only project we had identified at the time. So I just want to be clear on that. Yes, there are many other projects that could be used for this type of funding, but at the time we made the decision, this was the only one that we had on the books to consider. And frankly, being candid, it was an opportunity. And the council decided to choose this as that opportunity.
So how did the city's contribution, you said earlier, it started out at 10 million. How did it get to 18 million?
So at the time it was 10 million in TLT through like just a direct contribution and a $30 million loan. So we did not want to do the loan option anymore. So that's why it became an 18 million contribution.
So, the loss of the fields. My daughter plays softball.
That's a good thing.
I was just in Salem this last weekend. I got the sunburn. You know, those are my trophies for watching my daughter play softball. She's going to play at Gordon Faber in 2 weeks. The Valley Invite, Triple Crown, bringing in over 100 teams. You can correct me with the numbers. Over 100 teams. They're going to use those 8 fields that are currently there. They're going to use the 4 over at Tualatin Hills. They're going to use the 4 over at the fairgrounds. Oh wait, those are going to be gone soon because the master plan for the fairgrounds calls for those to be wiped out for RV parking. I appreciate your comments. Thank you for the commitment that the Hops has shown baseball and softball in the region. I can attest to it because the Glencoe softball field is premier. The other 3 high school softballs are crap. So when we talk about replacing these fields, I don't want replacement. I don't want in kind. This is an opportunity to take what we have and make it even better. And I appreciate your comments, sir, about you're working on a plan and you're going to bring a plan to the Parks and Rec and then to the public. I want the public involved in the creation of that plan. Don't give me 3 options to comment on. Bring people who have a vested interest in softball and baseball and in these tournaments. High school sports, my daughter plays softball at Liberty High School. They only got to play 5 games there this year because of the weather. So let's not talk about replacing, let's talk about expanding. Go visit the Wallace facilities in Salem. Go visit Delta Park in Portland. Go visit Hoodview Park in Happy Valley. Go visit Medford, I can't think of Drive-In Wire Field or whatever it is. They've got a beautiful complex down there. So let's not, and here in Hillsboro, we're right on the edge of suburbia. There's land out there. And I know that's controversial, but there's an opportunity to not just squeeze a field here or there, but to actually continue the vision that this city, this community established several years ago when they built Gordon Faber. Let's take it to the next level. Let's look at the entire problem of ball fields in this area, and let's make it better.
Thank you. We'll definitely take your comments and explore that.
Just piggybacking on a couple things. When the feasibility study was done, how much revenue would bring in for the beds? And was it also done how much revenue is brought in by the different tournaments, youth tournaments that come and all, everything that was just covered? And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, so I'll let KL speak to the analysis you guys did on the Eco Northwest study. Are you specifically talking about the economic impact analysis?
Yeah, comparison between that and the tournaments that come, with all the families that come, because we do have something coming in now.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to eliminate a lot of that because it's just not there, it's just described. So it's a trade-off, and so did anyone really look at that? Are we really gaining anything that way?
So we haven't done a detailed assessment of that. We are talking about that as part of our lost use to see what the numbers are. I know the Hops have done an analysis on the economic impact. We just haven't done the comparison yet. Just being honest with you.
Wouldn't that be kind of important to see if we're losing more than we're gaining before this thing is so far down the road? That it's really, because it's a baseball use now, so conditional use is going to go through. The development is just a matter of the nuts and bolts of building something. So it seems like, what happened here when we didn't have all these discussions publicly with all the players, because we might not gain a penny out of this. And then secondly, it's not just baseball fields. There's soccer fields we're short on. So now the money that's going to go to replace baseball fields, now we're short on soccer fields as well. So you're taking out of a kitty of broad recreational use.
Yeah, so I do want to maybe address something about the lost use. We're making the assumption that we're not going to make up the use. I get that there are more benefits with having it all on one complex and having these tournaments together. I totally understand that.
It's a requirement.
So I just want to make sure we're clear that we're not going to be losing the use. We have to make up for it. So I'm not sure what the impacts would or would not be to tournaments. We're going to explore that as part of our lost use discussion. But I just want to state that for the record. Like, a lot of the comments that I'm hearing assume that we're not going to make up use. I just want to make that clear that we have to make up the use.
And when you say make up use, you mean replace 3 fields?
So replace the use that was on those 3 fields. So if we can find other areas that have underutilized fields that we can make, I'll just use an example. I'm not saying this is specifically what we're doing because this is what we're exploring right now. If there are areas that had underutilized fields that we can make improvements to, then it's not necessarily replacing the field, it's improving the field that exists somewhere. We're exploring those options right now.
But it's still just 3 fields, not a tournament facility.
Yeah, we're looking at replacing those 3, the use associated with those 3 fields right now.
Tournaments use multiple locations. That Valley Invite that I mentioned, they will be playing that weekend on 4 different facilities.
But the home is at Gordon Faber and the main.
That's where the largest number of fields is.
So I just want to make that clear. Like, we are going to find a way to make that. We're going through that analysis right now. And as part of that analysis, we'll look at, like, okay, if we did this option, what does that look like for tournaments? What does that look like for access? Because candidly, Gordon Faber Recreation Complex is out there. For some of our communities that are a little closer to the downtown area or further south, it can be a challenge to get there if you don't have transportation. So we're also thinking about those kind of things as well. Again, I wish I had the answers for you today, but we're still working on that.
Do you think it would be reasonable the city could condition the conditional use permit and then the design review to say, until this is solved, you don't pass go. We can only take it so far. That would put it on, well, the city certainly wants this, Hops want this, a lot of people want this, but there seems like there needs to be a stop, go no further until this is solved, because you can hear everybody's upset about this. And there's a lot of people upset about this outside this room, I can assure you of that, just in talking to people all over the city.
Yeah, so that would be a decision that would be made by the appropriate body. I wouldn't say that we as staff would want to do that because, and again, we have timelines that we have to meet. And I'll just also be clear, we still have to take the next contract amendments to our city council to get approved. So there are steps beyond just the land use process that we have to go through.
But you can move heaven and earth when you want something bad enough. If these guys need it, the city needs it, people could get in a room, get a meeting, I think you could make it happen. We work pretty quick here, as you know, Raheem, when we want to.
Yeah.
If Intel wanted to open a new fab in 2 months, believe me, we would make it happen. That's just the way we do things here. So.
You know, Raheem, I appreciate the candidness and honesty about where it's all at. But as the last gentleman was just saying, this project's been going on for 2.5, 3 years, and all I'm hearing tonight is we're working on it, we're working on it. There's little to no answers being provided tonight. That this is just a meeting as a requirement for the process. Why aren't we working? And you know, maybe we are working day and night to make sure that we can address a lot of these questions. It's poor project management that we're hitting this point and we're working on it. We don't have that answer. We don't have these answers for all of these things that are going to affect us as citizens' lives in this city.
I would have loved to be here today telling you how we've come up with the lost use. It would be nice to have that, but I don't. And we will have that at a not too distant future. And we will have another meeting to inform the public on what that looks like. This is where we are, and I appreciate your comments. In an ideal situation, it would have been nice to sequence this. Timelines in the project shift, candidly too, also played into the decision of how the loss of use is being addressed. So
the timeline was set by Major League Baseball, not by the city, not by the citizens. Well,
and it's a tight timeline.
But who cares? I mean, that's their issue. That's not what is best for us. And I just have one other thing to say. In the past, concerts have been put on.
Let's be respectful here. Like, one at a time, please.
Smaller concerts have been put on, you know, like the Latino Cultural Festival in the past, and everything else. Complaints. So these 12 concerts, and I assume they're not going to be in the middle of winter. I assume they're going to be in the 6 months of nice. Cram them in there.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, the way the stadium is, downtown field is configured right now, and the way the infrastructure is, yeah, there's some challenges with the sound traveling and all that. Well, we're in a unique situation where we're building something brand new, which we can build not just for baseball, but for entertainment as well, and look at ways to mitigate the sound. So we have that option here. I'm not going to say that we won't get complaints. We probably will get some complaints, but we have an opportunity to mitigate that through the design process as well.
So what is the little property line adjustment? You mentioned the little property line adjustment, and I don't understand what
Before you answer that, I just want to make sure that we're not giving any property away as we talk through this, just in case that assumption comes up. Anyway, we're not giving any property away.
I just don't know that anybody has ever heard of this little property line adjustment.
Yeah, so it's really just solving an existing problem. So if you look at the complex and all the property lines, there are probably 6 different property lines, and per building code, you don't want private utilities crossing property lines. So really, we're solving that problem so that the complex is on its own piece of property, and that the main line and all the utilities feed off of it directly into that facility, and that you don't have them crossing property lines.
So are they crossing, you know, Volkswagen's property lines or something? Or
No,
is it BPA or?
It's really what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's us holding ourselves to the building code and doing that. Yeah, and then we're also putting the future Century Boulevard overpass into its own tract, so that when the time comes to build that, it's ready to go.
Property lines. The building code prohibits property lines that go through buildings, and so we're cleaning that up as well. Like Sean said, the site is actually made up of about 5 or 6 tax lots, and so there's some existing non-conforming property lines that are not in areas that the building code would allow them to be today, so we're cleaning that up.
is the city expecting a need for additional full-time employees to manage and operate the facility?
Yeah, so with this option, so the way we work right now, thanks for asking that question, we do a lot of the maintenance on Ron Tonkin Field, the day-to-day maintenance. I think the cleanup is on the hops after the baseball games. With this option, which is one of the reasons that's helpful to us, is we're separating duties. So they will be responsible for all of the operations, maintenance, utilities, all the stuff associated with the new ballpark. That way we don't need to staff it.
So how many full-time positions will be lost?
So we're not planning on losing any positions for this because we are still going to be using Ron Tonkin Field. We were probably using it more in the cleanup and things like that to support the hops. We won't be needing that anymore because we can use that space now to program things for the community that the hops are taking over that time.
Unless they're having an event next door, then it'll be null and void.
Well, we're negotiating that right now, and we're negotiating how that joint use works. So
it's convenient that the negotiations are all in private. Just
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
A comment and question. Can we be assured that once the loss of use plan is made and approved by Parks and City Council, that it will be addressed, the funding and the construction, with the same urgency that we are funding and constructing the hops?
Yeah, I could see that.
Timeline will be.
We recognize that that's a need. There will be some short-term impacts, no doubt, like during the construction and all that. But yeah, we really need to get those in place as soon as possible.
Full loss of use, not just three fields.
Well, and we'll quantify all that throughout the process.
So Karen raised a point about employees. So I read in one of the articles that was in the Hillsboro Times that it came out in the report that KL had done about the economic impact, and it said there was going to be 381 FTE created for this new project. Is that accurate?
And that's after construction. That's not the construction.
Yeah, that's
381 full-time employees.
So
it's more than parks altogether.
I don't do the studies. I don't know how the studies work, but it has to do with the ripple effect of projects like this. So it's not 381 of our employees. It's employees that are impacted by the impact of the state.
Yeah.
I don't know how that stuff works.
That's not what the press, or not what the Business Journal said.
So I'm not going to,
That's not how
and I'm not going to comment on what was in that article.
Is it a mistake?
Yeah, it just seemed way out of reason.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
But anyway.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, go ahead, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, the city owns a big chunk of property out by the airport. Was that looked at all for any of this? Or?
Are you talking on the west side of the airport?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, that's the location of our new police headquarters.
Across Evergreen.
Oh, across Evergreen?
Meek Road.
Directly
So like
across
on
Evergreen?
Sewell?
Meek Road.
Yeah, somewhere up in there. I don't know. We looked at some property there.
I think he's talking about Meek Road.
Yeah, so we have some property that the city and the Hillsboro Economic Development Council, which the city council is at, have purchased up on the north side, in the North Hillsboro area. That was specifically purchased for industrial land and to try aggregate the land to hopefully get some large users in to come and further economic development in the community.
Is it this industrial land?
It is industrial land.
That fields up?
Yeah, it is, and the industrial land designation on the existing fields have been in place for a very long time, right? So, the community's used to them as being used. Any other comments, questions?
I had a quick one for Carissa. So if I heard you right, you're not going to do any traffic planning or transportation planning for this proposed use. I think you said the existing would work.
Yeah, so as part of this process, since we are keeping the spectator and the operational capacity the same within the existing facility, per the land use code, we're not required to do a traffic impact analysis, which would identify additional public improvements that had to be done to support it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't meet that, it doesn't pass beyond that threshold.
How are we keeping the spectator capacity the same?
Through agreements and operational terms and policies and things that we're negotiating right now with the Hops.
Okay. Because KL said you were going to use both, they could use both fields for a big tournament. So if we used the Hop Stadium and the new stadium, that wouldn't go along with what you're saying. So you're saying there would be a restriction? Because we have a capacity now, we could exceed it by quite a lot now after the new stadium's done. So it seems to me that triggers traffic planning, having done this for 42 years. We get triggered on a 3-lot subdivision to do traffic planning. So
in those cases when we might have a large event, say even like the Helvetia Marathon, that would go into like a special event permit process. But regular operations, we're setting a ceiling on the spectator limit. If for some reason a larger event, maybe not even attributed to the Hops themselves, came and worked on the site, we would have to do a special event permit where all of the local agencies would be notified. There'd be traffic planning. We would have to have special pedestrian and transportation plans and road closures, things like that.
Like the air show.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions or comments? I will say that there's also some contact sheets in the back in case you think of any other questions or comments that you may have. They'll come back to us. Yes, sir.
I think it's, I guess, kind of a common question that can be put onto the notes for later, but with the expectation that this new stadium will be bringing in new people, wouldn't it be beneficial to do that traffic analysis if we're going to be having more people coming through? There's some tight areas over in that area. I know just going from Century to Evergreen to Embry already, even before things started ramping up, is already a pain. And I worry about pedestrians and the dog park there. People like to walk around. Wouldn't it be beneficial to look into that proactively as opposed to when everything's already in place and we're having to find reactive solutions?
So I know there are options that will be presented, I'll just say for example, the TriMet comment that I made earlier, right? Having more options for people to get there are good things, right? So we're hoping that will help with the situation, but like Sean mentioned right now, we don't have to do any of that traffic impact analysis as part of this work. However, as part of our regional transportation program, we do look at options to improve traffic in the area. So we are building out the North Hillsboro area, which does help with some of that, not necessarily right here. But between the TriMet expanded service and some of our regional work, that's all we have right now.
So it's kind of being done, just not by this project.
Yes.
Kind of along those lines, I love that Jackson School has a bike lane. I live in North Hillsboro, and I would go to a Hops game on my bike if it weren't on Evergreen with the crazy traffic.
Yeah.
If it was on the sidewalk, there was a bike lane. And those kind of bike lanes, I think, are a great idea for Hillsboro because electric bikes are becoming more popular, all sorts of other things, and I think that could be a great option.
Thank you for that. Actually, one of the things that will be going by the stadium is a Crescent Park Greenway Trail that will take some time to get in place, but it would provide access from the north side of the complex. But that's something that's in the works too. It wouldn't be done immediately or in the next, I'm not sure on the schedule. But yeah, we're looking at finding ways to build a portion of that with some of the work we're doing if we were to mitigate the fields up there. We're still very early in that work, so, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions, comments? Just from us, I know there is still some things that we need to work through. The loss of use being a big one, and the city is committed to doing that. So you'll hear more about this project. I'm sure you heard it from either the mailer, our social, or from your neighbor or your friends. You will see more information out there. We have a project website that's available where we continue to post regular updates. Questions that we get asked frequently, we provide those questions up there with responses. And our staff is always available to take any questions or comments. And candidly, we want to see this be successful and the community not lose any use. So we're very mindful of those comments. But lastly, maybe thank you all. I know it takes a lot of your time to come here, especially in traffic at this time. But just thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.